evening. Welcome to the Fayette County School Corporation Public Work Session and combination of the Board of School Trustees business meeting for Tuesday, September 12th, 2023. And if we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If we could all remain standing for a moment of silence for our board president, Leslie, for the passing of her husband yesterday. And please keep her in your thoughts and prayers and help the family to stay strong during this difficult time. Thank you.
Ready?
Okay.
Ready?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Lori, and thank you for stepping in. Welcome, everyone, and this is a combined meeting, just for public's knowledge more than anything, but we have a team here from Gibraltar and Skillman, and this is really a time to follow up on our last meeting, work session, where we looked at two options with lease bonds with the natatorium and then an elementary school. Frazee was the school that we discussed as making most sense to begin investing in remodeling and refurbishing those learning spaces for the next 20-25 years. So I'm going to turn it over to these gentlemen who are here, and they have some information they're going to share, and it's just going to be an open time of dialogue, and then after that there will be a time for public comments on the topics of this work session. So, Chris?
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you again. And I want to explain a little bit about before we jump into our items that we're going to discuss this morning. I want to talk about the process for what would be next. What happens as you zero in on a project. So when we get the charge from the school board to proceed as directed, the process begins for Skillman and Gibraltar to go into the details of all the needs and also all the wants that would need to happen in these projects. We have these checkpoints along the way. We have a 35% checkpoint, 50% checkpoint, 75% checkpoint. So as we are doing the process and planning with the designated people that would be a part of that planning team to make sure that we have everything included in this project, we have these checkpoints where we're sharing all of our information with Skillman so that you have up-to-date estimating. So you have an estimated idea about what the project cost is going to be. So as we're kind of creeping up to the budget, we are also protecting the budget in the same way that if there's a large ticket item that you've always wanted to do, but we're not sure it's going to fit into this, we still design it, but then we put it into an alternate. So when the bids come in, you're able to either make the choice of adding it in or not adding it into the project. So I wanted to explain that because when the two thresholds that we're exploring is, two $6.1 million thresholds, we would design up to that to make sure that you maximize your dollars and get everything that you possibly can into this project. So wanted to open with that, and then what we would do is create, when we get the direction from the board, we would create a planning schedule. And you've seen plenty of schedules from us, but this planning schedule is a little bit different because it involves the designated school people to define those classrooms, define those learning spaces, define all those items, and also working with Daryl and his team on the HVAC, the mechanical, the electrical, plumbing, and all those different items, because that scope gets refined, and then we make sure that we're still on track to be under budget for the project in general. So, and then what we end up doing is you have checkpoints along the way as we will come present to the board and provide design updates every single month until it gets to the bidding phase. Okay, I'm always going to put this slide in here that I will go back to. Okay, Randy. Right click goes back.
Right click. You may have to click on then the left to do back. Is it back there?
You can also roll the thing on there.
Yeah, if
and
you
it'll
use
roll
the
back.
roller.
Let's do the roller, that's so much easier. We'll start with the long-term stewardship of your district from your facilities and maintenance, also to school board and school board before you. You have done a great job of maximizing the dollars in your district, making sure that you are investing money in the right area. So wanted to make sure that we bring that forward again. That personal pride and maintenance is very clear as you walk into the buildings. They're clean, safe, operational, all those different factors that you have come to grown as standard, but it is not necessarily standard across the state of Indiana. Your level of standard of how you care for your facilities is different. It's above and beyond. So I want you to know that. Priority needs updates, just protection of the facility assets. There's two different angles here. One is, yes, the learning environment, but also you are protecting your facilities to making sure that you are efficient with the mechanical, electrical, plumbing as well, but also those lurking things that we talked about over a year ago about that are inside your buildings to make sure that you're prepared for those items as they come forward as well. And then primary objectives, as you know, in the beginning, and it stays true when we're building something, it's making sure that it's something that functions for you, you're getting the value, the efficiency out of it. School for the future, we've had a number of conversations about also making sure that we're not creating anything that gives you a dead end in the future, that you can't at 5, 10, 15 years down the road do something different. And then also the aesthetics and that feel, that learning environment when you're in there. This was that summary of needs matrix, so the elementary schools and the facilities, when we went through, you've seen this, but just wanted to make sure that when we had selected Fayette as that primary place to begin that benchmark for this project, just wanted to, again, make sure that you're aware of those items that are there. Now, these are the items that you don't necessarily see in the building. Just wanted to make sure that we bring that forward. This is an existing condition. Thank you again for your time that you guys invested to do the school tours with us, but just give you a baseline of just refreshing your memory. In 2 days, we saw a lot of buildings, so just wanted to bring you back into to Frazee again. And then our Frazee elementary plan that we're proposing is that updating and replacing the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing priority needs. So carrying that forward, fixing what you have, and then also investing and recognizing the investments that you currently have in that building. And then also renovating and updating existing student restrooms for function, efficiency, and ADA compliance. I think it was pretty clear, we could see in that hallway that log jam of that one major restroom that you have in its location. So increasing the efficiency by getting more stations in there, more toilets in there, and bringing the wash stations to the outside. And then replacing identified needs throughout the building, so just those finished needs as well. If you see the light blue is what we're proposing is that like light refresh, and so that would be lighting, and I'm going to show you a picture example, but that would be the lighting, the flooring, the walls, all of those different items that are inside the classroom. And then hallways as well. You go into that orange and that red area, that's more of that moderate to heavy construction, so there's going to be some more extensive work that has to happen in the restroom areas as well. So just gives you an idea that just about every single part of the interior of the building is going to be touched. Wanted to show you kind of a before and after. You've visited this building as well. Trying to, rather than list an items, but wanted to give you a visual of what the end in mind is. So you see the before picture in the bottom right, and then the larger picture in the back is where the end would be with new lighting, new ceiling, new teaching wall, and then also some other functions of that classroom as well. And then the other part of this, with the Connersville High School, I wanted to show you just frame of reference, the existing pool. Mike has a, how many page report from the pool assessment?
Just a few.
But I think a 80-page pool assessment that was completed on the pool. If you remember in the very beginning, we went over 3 different options, and it would be a basin improvement option, and then also expanding the pool and then building a new pool. So we went over those 3 different options. We're not going to have him go over the 80-page report today, but just wanted to make sure that we're bringing about example items included but not limited to repairing the pool leaks, replacing the pool dehumidification system, upgrading pool filtration system, and then all the other components that would be included in that pool. So it is taking what you have, and the way that we would do it is start together again with those people that are most closest to the pool to identify the mechanical, electrical, plumbing needs, but then also carry forward with those aesthetics. So to bring that pride back, there's a lot of pride in history in your swimming program, but bringing the facility that you have now and bringing that function and that pride back moving forward. So,
And Chris, just to expand on it, just so everybody understands what this includes is, it's like walking into a new facility that has a 6-lane swimming pool. It's not an expansion of the pool or a new pool. It's basically walking into a facility that has a brand new pool, new filtration systems, new dehumidification system, new finishes in the pool and out of the pool, but everything associated with the pool itself is being refreshed and updated.
and then here's a before and after of something that we've done as well, is taking a pool that was just not used, not functioning, had a lot of work that needed to be done, and this pool is not as large as your pool, but just wanted to give you an example of bringing that pride back and that function to that pool for this
Well,
community.
it actually is the same size as your pool. You're looking at a 6-lane, 25-yard pool here. They had issues where they had leaky pipes. We had to replace the drain system, the gutter system, all the tile on both the pool and on the deck. It had new finishes. But basically, it's a very good comparison as far as the size of the pool is the same as yours. And the type of work that was planned for this pool is very similar to what the type of work for Fayette's schools.
So this is just an overview of like preliminary budget of what it would look like if you were to go into a project hearing. You have the two different projects. The allocated funds for that has already been set, and what we would do is just work with your team to make sure that we're designing up to that, again, to get every single dollar that you can into the projects. What I do want to share is that long-term planning of what this allows you to do. We talked about this last time, but I want to bring it forward because I've thought more about it, but that elementary benchmark for future planning. So not only do you get an idea of carrying forward that vision of what you have for elementary learning at Frazee, but you also are creating this benchmark to in future apply to your other buildings as well. By doing one building, you get the opportunity to monitor that future enrollment. You've had 2 years of kindergarten enrollment trend going up, and so in a year, 2 years, 3 years from now, it gives you a little bit more time to make a decision on the other 4 elementaries, but the one that you know that is going to be with you forever is the Frazee Elementary, so investing in that now, and then carrying that vision forward and having that time to plan for it as well.
So Chris, one
Yes.
question on that. So if we look at, because different options have been proposed about adding on to some elementary schools, increasing, doubling their capacity. By doing this with Frazee, we could still build on, and that part of the building would already be refurbished. Somebody asked me that the other day, and I said, it really does lend itself to where we could add on new space if we needed to at Frazee too.
Right, you're fixing what you have, and then it gives you the option that if you were to add a 4-classroom addition, 6-classroom addition in the future, you aren't closing the door on that at Frazee.
Excellent.
No, that's good. And then that's, the next item, that future forward thinking and planning. Making sure, again, that you aren't going to make decisions now that give you dead ends for the future. And then strategic planning to protect the budget. That's, if you know our work in other districts, that's what we do best together with Skillman and Gibraltar, is making sure that you have multiple options in front of you to make sure that you are getting the value out of these projects, and it's going to be something that you're very proud of at the end. Next steps, obviously the securing the project funding, which would be not us, it would be on your end. Completing schematic design, that would be Gibraltar's, that would be our responsibility to bring forward, and probably I'd say the next 30 to 60 days is that schematic design is, you just see a floor plan today with colors on it. The next iteration, as we dig in deeper, Skillman needs more information from us, and as we dig deeper into the project, we start to show you what the room is going to look like, what the hallway, what the restroom is going to look like, what the HVAC system and all the other systems that are being worked on, and what that looks like as well. And then we call that schematic design because we design up to that point, and then Skillman gives us feedback to make sure that we are still on track with what we've allocated for the project at Frazee. Because sometimes you can get together with school people, and I'm guilty of it, you get excited and you're like, what about this, what about this? Skillman's job at those checkpoints is making sure that we're staying on track so that we're still delivering on everything that we had said. And that's that next item, it's align the schematic design with the budget, and so that's something that we would do with Skillman as well, and make sure that the board gets updates. And then school board approval to proceed with the projected construction starting on both of these projects summer 2024.
It would be our intent to bid the projects together. The larger package itself would likely attract more bidders.
So would there be some work prior to summer? What would happen like January to June? Just to give the board an idea.
For us, the heavy work is not going to be on the board from now until January. It would be on whoever you designate to be on the team with Gibraltar to go through the design process. So that is defining it and then getting to that construction document. Once we get to January and we would lay out the schedule, the work starts to get heavy on the Skillman side because they start doing the project bidding, that pre-bidding, all getting the information out there, starting to attract bidders and doing that process. So, and then groundbreaking, obviously, they would wait until the end of the school year till kids get out. And usually they're pretty efficient, it's like the next day. And then the other part of that, which I think we shared in the beginning, is Gibraltar stays on board till the very, very end, because there's going to be things throughout that we have to have continual communication with the board and also continual communication with Skillman. But when that groundbreaking happens, that's where I've seen the magic from the principal standpoint is Skillman has someone on site that is working with the principal and the staff there every day about the phasing of it. So it is what classrooms are going to be needed. We're going to renovate this pod first, and then this is where learning is going to happen, because you're going through a construction project during the school year, so there is some impact. What Skillman does is, and to your point, which you lived on the other end, is they try to protect the staff, the students, and the families so that it is seamless until the very end.
What kind of time frame are you talking from maybe starting to finish? I know that's probably hard, but...
Yeah, we met with Skillman a little bit earlier this week to have that kind of conversation, so do you mind sharing a little bit more about it?
Yeah, sure. We'll dive into it a little bit more, but 12 months would be quick and 16 would be long. So I just say that as we have to identify lead times on certain materials. So to give you an example, if we were to replace the pool pack unit that controls all the dehumidification for the pool, something like that right now runs anywhere between 8 and 10 months just to acquire it. So there are long lead time items like that we'll have to back the schedule into.
With the pool, would you be extended downtime on the pool, so would we lose the season?
We can plan around that. So if we bid the project per se, we don't necessarily have to mobilize immediately. So there could be a 90 or 120-day wait period or something. I know that sounds like a long time. We could wait to start that construction to make sure we're not costing you any money to staff a site manager or project manager or something like that, and make sure we're doing a groundbreaking or taking over the building around the pool, around the swim season. Does that make sense?
So when are we done with the pool, Daryl?
So we'd be done about March. Is there a chance we could start, I mean, sections in February, there's some club swimming in March. I mean, can we get started earlier so we don't affect the middle school and high school season as much?
Okay. I can't answer that now, but I can go back and kind of take a deeper dive and definitely follow up with everyone.
And for us, that would depend on when we get them the construction documents and then they go through the bidding process. But to your point, I mean, time is of the essence because the earlier you can get in there, the earlier you get done.
Less effects it'll have on
Daryl, what's the start time for the season?
October.
So just say October 1.
Yeah, that's pretty much the girls' season. I think it's the second week of October, and then the boys start 2 weeks later. So October, they're going to hit it hard for high school.
Okay.
Middle school will start in August. So first day of school, roughly, so.
Okay, and then they're done with it by when, I'm sorry?
Should be March 1st, we should be clear, probably last week of February, actually, but.
Okay.
And Tim, I know Skillman's worked through a number of pools. The phasing, that's a little bit different, right? So elementary school, you can say, hey, this hallway is going to be for the next 2 weeks. Can't go down this hallway. You can't shut down 2 lanes. Only swim in work. That doesn't work.
So as far as the components and supplies and everything, say you would want to start on it March 1st, not saying that that'll happen. How far in advance can you order everything? I mean, how to maybe have it there and ready so there won't be more of a wait time or?
So there is the possibility to explore what we would call an early bid package. So let's say Gibraltar gets halfway through their drawings. For major lead time items like mechanical equipment like that, most of the time that can actually be engineered. And as long as funding is available, we can order that ahead of time. So if the design's 6 months and we get halfway through, we say, hey, this is going to take 8 months lead time to get it here. We may say, okay, let's go ahead and release this specific piece of equipment or multiple pieces of equipment as a bid package, and we'll acquire it and get it here. So that would give us 3 months ahead.
That'd be great to do that so you don't have to wait, kind of.
And you guys aren't alone. I mean, this is 8 months on a pool pack, with like switch gear, major electrical switch gear in the switcher. We're seeing like 13, 14 months on some of that from the day we order it. You also have to build in on the front of that the time to review the submittals. So we have to award the project. That low bidder has to prepare their submittals for the engineer to review. Once those are reviewed, approved by the engineer, then the order can actually take place. So it's not just the 8 months that it takes to order it, it's typically another 30 days to get the paperwork processed, make sure we're ordering the right equipment, model, size, X, Y, Z. So.
Do you anticipate any, you've done such a good job with your, going through our facilities with a fine-tooth comb. There are always surprises when you actually get in, start tearing down walls and start going through plumbing. Are we prepared financially to take care of those kinds of things and timeline-wise?
Yeah, so they build in, when Skillman does the entire budget and walks us through that stage of it, they have built in their contingency for all those unforeseen circumstances. So they don't, they anticipate, and they build that into the budget. So it's not something that makes you take things away as you're farther down the process. If anything, if you get through and there are no unforeseen, then it allows you some more items that are on that wish list that you're able to pull forward. So yes, definitely that's.
Okay.
And we'll communicate that as transparent as we can. So if it's a percentage based or an amount per area, or something like that, you'll see that number. And then so what I always get is, okay, well, what if we're not using the money because we were fortunate not to find any hidden items in the walls, etc. As construction goes on, the risk goes down for finding new things. So maybe, hey, we didn't take a carpet alternate, right, at bidding because we didn't think we had enough money. Well, now we haven't used this $100,000 of allowance. Well, let's go ahead and do the carpet project now that we're 50% of the way through the schedule. Right? So as the risk decreases, we'll come back and ask you how you want to prioritize those dollars.
So Jane at our last work session presented kind of like a timetable for state requirements that would have to move forward with the funding options. And I think she laid out the two different, what we would end up doing is overlaying our design schedule to their bid schedule, to their construction schedule, so that it's all on one, so that you know what the responsibility of the school system, also the responsibility of the board, responsibility of Gibraltar and Skillman throughout the process from beginning to the very end.
They have a copy of that at their places too, so it's pretty aggressive between now and the end of November.
It is, yes.
So there's a lot of work to be done.
That's why I gave you cookies first. It's gonna be a lot of work.
Hopefully they're good.
But you know, the nice thing about where we are, think about all the information that we have up to this point. I mean, it's all gonna be at our fingertips moving forward. So a lot of the pre-work has been done, which is why it's nice to go through a study, is we have engineers and we have architects that know Frazee extremely well. So as we start to move into the design phase, they're gonna be a huge asset. And then same thing at the pool as well. Mike's done everything in that pool but jump in and swim. Or did you? No.
This is very helpful, thank you. Just to give us an idea of what we need to do and when we need. This is our syllabus for the next meeting.
Yeah, and I wanted to give you a little, I mean, obviously, we've gone through quite the relationship together, you know how we communicate. It's the same communication all the way up till bidding, so you get more information than you need about the design progress. So the progress of where we're at on the budget, where we're at on the estimating, where we're at on the design. Here's what we've landed on the classroom design to the bathroom design. All of that is shared with you, so it's something that's done with you and not to you as we go through the process.
And the staff has input, has a great deal of input as far as.
So the nice thing about staff, you know, they kind of provided their input on where are those pressure points in the building, what are their wishes, what are their needs, all of that. So we do have that collective voice, but as we go through, we definitely lean heavily. Usually the group gets a little bit smaller to make sure that it is, that we're still on track with what we heard from staff. Really hard, I had 8 kindergarten teachers. It was hard to get all 8 kindergarten teachers to agree on the same book that they want to deliver, but they're all very amazing. So usually that group gets a little bit smaller as we go through the design phase for this. And then we get down to the end, which is we have our interior design team at Gibraltar that will walk through a design presentation about deciding the color of the carpet and matching the existing conditions to make sure that everything looks like it has always was meant to be there. So,
That's the fun part,
It
the last
is.
stages,
I
that's
always
it.
go to them. I don't provide input because I'm not allowed to at home, so I shouldn't be able to at school. You know, I can provide input on, you know, if you do LVT versus carpet and the function in the classroom versus all of that, but when it comes down to color, I do love to sit and watch that whole process happen because it's beautiful.
But it would be a finish, those of you that went to Loper in Shelbyville, our classrooms would be very similar with
Yeah,
finishes.
it would have that very
But
similar.
no bright green.
Yeah. I
No.
don't think that, no.
No bright green, sorry.
And, you know, and I'm glad that you brought that up because, you know, our communication to the public is going to be extremely important because you would be driving by, if you have a child in that building, you're going to understand, and you're going to have a child in the new classroom and be like, so excited. It's going to be our job to help partner with you about how we get the communication out as that process happens, because someone will drive down the street and not necessarily notice because we're not raising a roof and we're not, you know, changing the exterior front structure of the building. The magic is happening inside the building, so we got to make sure that the public understands that. Similar as you drove by when we pulled up to Loper, you couldn't tell the work that they were doing on the inside of Loper, but once you got in, you could definitely feel it.
Did they have an open house for maybe the public, Loper, when they got in? I was just curious. Or,
Yeah, that's
it will, it's
typically a
not.
part, they do like when the process is done. There's like a celebration on the front end, and then there's a celebration on the back end. And I typically stay engaged with the principals during the process, just because it's rare that you go through this as a principal and you have a day job and you're guiding children. As helpful as Skillman is, I still stay on because I have principals call me on my cell phone and say, hey, we're trying to, we can't play on our playground because we're getting a new playground, so we're offline for 4 months. Do you have some suggestions? And so worked with so many different people on building a plan for them. I just stay engaged throughout that process so that they have a voice to bounce off of.
You guys have any thoughts, questions, comments? So what I will seek from you is permission to move forward with the legal steps here at this meeting, if everyone's pretty good where we're at. We do want to provide a time for public comments, if anyone has anything they'd like to share.
Nice way for them to tell me to step away.
Yeah.
If
You
you're
don't
going to
have
use
to.
this, whoever you're going to scroll.
Yeah. I didn't mean to dismiss you, but I wanted to be sure you offered that opportunity. Anyone have anything?
Is there anyone that has any comments at this time? Okay, I guess not.
Is there anything else for these gentlemen here? Because they may not want to set through the whole business part tonight, but I appreciate the work
Yeah.
they,
Thank
both
you very
companies
much,
have been
Chris.
great.
Thank you.
And I also want to shout out to Gibraltar. A lot of times businesses will do dinners or other things to recognize their clients, but they provided us a check to help support student needs that I wanted to acknowledge from Gibraltar too, and thank you for that. They've done that a couple of years now, and it's really appreciated, that partnership. So they will go to good use for supporting student learning.
Our pleasure.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. With that, we'll move into
Thanks,
our
guys.
Thank you.
board meeting. Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I'd like to seek a motion to approve the agenda as submitted and amended.
I so move.
Thank you. Thank you, Ann. Is there a second? Chris, thank you. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Thank you, motion carried. Okay, are there any other public comments of the agenda? Okay, we'll move into the consent agenda.
Lori,
Yes.
we got several people out there, I don't know if they know that we're starting our business meeting or not.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. Just, I got a good view.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay.
Hi, Brian. Hi, Kay. Hi, Mia.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Oh, my goodness. We have a quorum.
Okay.
Thanks for catching that.
Thank you, yes.
Thanks.
Okay, let's see. We're going through the consent agenda. We have the approval of the minutes from regular business meeting 8/8/23, SEA public hearing of 8/24/23, and public work session of 8/28/23. Personnel report, the retirements, resignations, leaves of absence. Approval of the August 2023 claims number 65668 to number 65873. And also a donation of $1,500 from Hoosier Feeder to WCC to be used to purchase equipment for the welding technology program. A donation of 5 vices from Howden Roots valued at $500 to WCC to be used in the precision machine program. So with that, I would like to, is there any discussion? I'd like to seek a motion to accept the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Ryan. Is there
I'll
a
second.
Thank you, Mark. Any discussion at this time? Okay, all those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. All right, action items. Personnel report, recommendations for employment. Mr. Harris.
And I will read this and I'll make note this is an unusual one. It is a revised report. And if you notice, most of the time we have highlighted what's been revised and, we've had additions. This one's a little different only because we actually had once we published the personnel report last week and sent it out to the board, we had one person that took a job elsewhere, so we've really removed a name. So that's why you don't see anything highlighted on here. It's just that there was a name that was on here that's been removed. So, like I said, that's a little bit different. But we are recommending certified staff, recommend Melissa Cole, special education teacher of service, working at Little Spartan Preschool. Classified staff, Jody Bunyard as custodian at Fayette Central and Connersville High School. Haley Davidson as a permanent substitute at Everton. Loyal Du Bois II as a summer mower. Cassie Robertson as a kindergarten assistant at Everton. Ashlyn Ribberger as Title I assistant at Everton. Gracie Robinson as the Head Start Nutrition bus assistant at Little Spartan. Daphne Tower as an educational assistant at CMS. And Dakota Vickers as custodian at CMS. Extracurricular, recommending for under certified staff, recommending Lindsay Brooks as the girls' head track coach. Jamie Ham as a 7th grade volleyball coach. Jacob Kirchhoff as the boys' head track coach. And under classified staff, recommending Jessica Morris as the assistant swim coach. Also a recommendation to increase the pay of Paula Lee, head custodian, to $15.10. Those are my recommendations on personnel report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Harris. I would like to seek a motion to approve the personnel report.
I so move.
Thank you, Ann. Do I have a second? Thank you, Chris. Is there any discussion?
Randy, I noticed that the pay scale, this is reflective of what we did last month? This
Correct,
month?
on the classified staff.
On the classified staff?
Yes.
Okay. So, and was that retroactive back to the first of school, or did it just start with our board meeting?
For the classified, for the year-round employees, it was retroactive to July 1.
Okay,
But likewise, we hadn't, even though we had started school prior to the approval at our August board meeting, we hadn't had a payday because of
Okay.
the way it works. But ultimately, all of the classified staff was retroactive to July 1 officially.
okay, so anyone that's gotten, any classified staff that has gotten a paycheck this year has been paid at this rate?
Yes.
Good, okay.
Okay. All of those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, approval of installation of new doors at WCC. Mr. Harris?
Well, this is one I'm coming to the board for prior approval. Board policy says any purchases such as this, it's $25,000 or over, get prior approval. This is about as close to that $25,000 mark as I think I've ever been on the high side of it. But I am requesting permission to purchase a new pair of doors for the Whitewater Career Center. Cost of $25,575.93. It's one of those, the main doors going in right there beside the office. They've been repaired, they've been tweaked, they've been everything over the years, but now they are rusted. They are not in a position to be adjusted or repaired any longer, and it's time to replace those. So,
Do I understand those are the original doors?
I think
from
so.
there? Wow, okay.
Yep.
They owe us
Well,
nothing.
they've served their purpose then, haven't they?
Yes, they have.
Okay.
Mr. Harris, do we have any local bids on that?
Scott Doors is the one.
Just one?
Yep. Well, and it's anything, I mean, to give you an idea, anything that is under $50,000, we're looking local to that, and we don't generally solicit multiple quotes and everything, so if it's under $50,000, we pretty well can bring you anything we want. If it's $50,000 or above, then we solicit 3 quotes.
Thank you.
Okay. I would like to seek a motion for the approval of installation of the new doors at WCC. Thank you, Jeremy. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ryan. Any more discussion? Okay, all those in favor, signify by raising your right hand. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, school improvement plans, Mrs. Casaro.
Okay, in your package, you have copies of all of the executive summaries for all the schools. So at tonight's meeting, I'm seeking approval of these plans. We have been making some tweaks as we go now that we have 2 years of consistent data. And at the end of this meeting, I'm going to go over our iLearn data and give you some examples of what those tweaks are. So at this point, if you have any questions, I believe all my administrators are in the audience. But at this time, I'm seeking a motion for approval of the school improvement plans for all of the schools.
Okay, thank you. All right, I would like to seek a motion for the school improvement plans. Okay, thank you, Chris. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ryan. Okay, is there any further discussion? Okay. One thing I'm wondering, do we ever get the results of those? I know we have the plans and everything. Do we hear yearly, or how often do we hear information from the plans? You know, how they're improving and all that?
Every year, the schools are required to have a school improvement team that reflects on the plans.
Okay.
Because of COVID and the lack of consistent assessment data and grades that are given to the schools, they have been pretty difficult to evaluate. But because we have 2 years of solid iLearn data, that's why we're doing a lot of the work with our schools in terms of what are their district initiatives, what are the things that we're putting in place, and how can we move forward based on the data that we have. So I see these plans being more useful in the next couple of years because we're back to that consistent assessment data. It's hard to reflect on things. 1 year we didn't even give NWA or iLearn. Then we had a lot of COVID gaps and things that we were dealing with. And then the second year, we were advised by the DOE not to use the previous year as a baseline data. So this is the first time in about 5 years that we've had 2 years of consistent data that we feel is data that we can accurately reflect on and make instructional decisions. So, and I'm going to kind of highlight that at the end. But each school, especially elementary, you'll see very common language of what their desired outcomes are based on our district initiatives, and then the middle school and high school as well. High school is a little bit different because their accountability points are a little bit different in terms of assessment data. They do not give iLearn, they have SAT. They do have a couple of end-of-course assessments, and then their graduation rate is another point in which they're held accountable for. So their school improvement plan is a little bit different, but most of the elementaries and middle schools, we're still looking towards making that state average on iLearn. And I'll go over where we are and what we're doing to address that. So it's a very good question.
Sounds good, okay. And I noticed on one of the improvement plans, one of the schools, and maybe more than one, but they do surveys for the parents and the students and all that.
Yeah.
I think that is a great idea. You know, maybe more of them are doing that also, but I think that's good.
It was a more common practice prior to COVID. A lot of the practices that we were doing prior to COVID changed with COVID, but education changed with COVID. So we're trying to figure out what works and what doesn't, and putting things back in place that were good data points for us in order for us to make significant change in our
It
achievement.
gives a voice for
Absolutely.
more involved. That's for
Absolutely.
sure. Okay.
What was our graduation rate last year?
92? Trent, do you remember?
92.8.
Yeah, I knew it was up.
It was up? Okay, that's what I thought.
What is it, what's the state, what are we supposed to be according to the state? What's-
90, isn't it?
We're above the state, we were above the state.
Yeah, we were above the state, so I think the state, I mean, don't quote me, I think the state's 90, but we were above the state average.
Okay, so we were above,
We were not a lot, but
Well,
we'll take
That's
every
two-
day.
Yeah, 2%,
we'll-
that's quite a
we'll-
bit.
we'll take
Almost
it.
3,
Yeah.
And Damon Havlicek is over our attendance, and he does a great job, and he's doing a lot of work with our prosecutor and our schools, and even our elementary schools. We're trying to get back to regular attendance. Again, COVID really had an impact on the attendance of kids and kids coming to school. I mean, the workforce is having that same issue of people coming back to work. It's the same thing with our kiddos. So kudos to Damon because he does a lot of work. He takes a lot of pride in that, going out and speaking to the people that can help these families get their kids here on time and here every day.
I thought that was a little high. It's 86.61 for the state average.
Is it
State
86?
average.
State average,
So we're 6%.
That's even better.
Yeah, and what is that data base? Graduation.
That's a tricky question.
Graduation rates have always bugged me, because do we start when they're freshmen?
That's
And
cohort
then-
data.
And then which would be COVID data, which wouldn't be very good to begin with, but before COVID, do we start as a freshman? If we had, I taught middle school, we would send, at one point in time, 400 kids to the high school, and we would graduate 262.
They count.
Where did they go?
Right.
You know,
Well, we're required by the state to track all of that, even if they're homeschool, if they withdraw. We have a pretty extensive withdrawal exit interview now, because we are required that. When they come in as freshmen, they're part of that cohort, and we're responsible for them for the next 4 years. Even our SLC kids, the 8th graders that we bring over, that's why we keep them as 8th graders and give them an extra year, because if not, they would be counted in that freshman cohort for our graduation rate.
And that's an unrealistic expectation for them.
Well, we're already saying they're at risk, so that's a way to keep them from impacting that graduation rate. There are lots of things that impact it, and we do get a chance to appeal some of them, and some of them we feel like should be in our favor, but a lot of times we don't win those.
Kim is our point person on that,
For graduation,
for following up where these kids go.
the exit interview right now is through Kelly Plum.
Okay.
And then we make sure that all of the options of SLC, online learning, all of that. But we sit down with every kid and make sure that and their families, and make sure that we have an exit interview with them. We're also working with the link to make sure that the link isn't bypassing us and enrolling kids at 16. So we have a pretty good working relationship with them right now, and I think we're making some good strides with that, keeping kids enrolled.
Now we just have to figure out how to keep them in the building.
Right. And the high school's doing a great job with that. I mean,
Do you
they're
think
being
the
creative.
impact of the SRO officers and their
Presence.
working with the administrators, do you think that that's really helped with some of our attendance issues?
I'm gonna ask the high school that, because they live that world way more than I do. You feel like that has any impact?
I didn't hear the question.
Do the SROs, the presence, and them working with the kids, do you feel like that's impacting kids staying in school more?
I think when they have that positive relationship with Erin, they're more likely to show up. They don't have that fear of being in trouble or whatnot. I think a lot of the impact with attendance is just things going on in the home that we don't necessarily have control over, but we definitely want to create that environment that they want to show up to every day. So it's that relationship piece, but Erin's presence is definitely important in that.
And I think what changed too, used to be not that many years ago, where if parents came in and signed their kids out and said, we're going to homeschool, they get assigned that homeschool number. Really, they aren't, I mean, that was a parent choice to put in, but a lot of times homeschooling never happened. And now, if kids are behind credit when they leave us and they don't have 10 credits at the end of their
If they're
freshman year.
not on target to graduate
graduate.
when they withdraw for homeschool, they ding us.
They count against us for that cohort still.
Mm-hmm.
So even though we don't know exactly what they're doing at home as a homeschooler, there's no accountability from the state on these homeschoolers. But they're holding us accountable that, well, they left your school, they only had 5 credits at the end of their freshman year, therefore they will count against us on the graduation rate in 3 more years. So that really puts a bigger burden on the high school to try to
Keep them from
we
withdrawing.
try to keep them in our programming and using our alternative program. So it's a
It's
challenge.
changed. The last 3 years, the homeschooling and the impacting our accountability has changed, and it's getting harder and harder.
Well, and we have incredible accountability about what happens to these kids, but once they're in homeschool,
We don't know.
the accountability factor is nebulous at best for a lot of them.
Okay, anything else? Okay, we have motions on the floor, so everyone in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on, approval to move forward with the legal steps for 2 projects, the elementary renovation and CHS auditorium renovation at a cost not to exceed $6,105,000 each. Mr. Collins.
Thank you. Based on the work session we just had, what I'm coming to you is now that we begin the process with the legal steps to start the bond process. So are there any questions about that? It would follow the timetable that you all have. We need the board permission to start that and begin our work with that team. So that's what I'm seeking now.
Okay, all right. I would like to seek a motion, please.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mark.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, is there any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Okay, moving on to discussion items, public hearing on the 2024 budget. Mr. Harris.
Strap in for the excitement. Settle down, Kim.
I know, finance is my favorite.
This is the budget hearing for our 2024 budget. So beginning January the 1st of 2024. One thing that has been published and advertised as state law requires is the bus replacement plan. This pretty well goes along, it's hard to see it up there on the screen. I know you've also seen other copies, so it's a little bigger, but next year we have less buses, but one thing that's probably noticed, I'm gonna go back a little bit more than a year. I think the last time when we put in for buses, we were looking at about $110,000 for the bus, if I remember, 115. A new bus today is costing $155,000. So they have significantly increased in cost. And it's one of those that goes on. So this is the plan for the buses. We don't have to order all of the buses necessarily on the plan, but this gives us a plan, an idea of where we're going to go as we proceed in the future. I'm going to stop there. Budget or the bus replacement plans and the capital projects plans are kind of separate items a little bit from it, but any questions about bus replacement?
On the bus replacement was on a 5-year, was it a 5-year rotation at one point?
We're on about a 10-year, the state recommends a 12-year replacement.
12-year, because I remember when we bought, I had just come on the board when we purchased some, I guess the question becomes, what are going to be our needs, and are we going to need to replace all the buses that we are taking out of service?
And I think that's something we look at every year, whether we truly need to replace one of the buses on the list or whether it's just a want to. I can tell you, looking at this year's where we're a little bit over $700,000, that's doable already. Next year it has over $1 million for new buses. I can tell you that's probably really not sustainable with everything else we want to do. I mean, when we're talking about debt money that we're collecting through local property taxes, that's where we're weighing the balance between school bus replacement to keep them safe, and also how much money do we put into our buildings. As we've already talked about, looking at the bond going forward with Frazee and the pool, that's what we weigh. As I describe it, if you just give me one project and say you have to do this and forget everything else, we can afford about anything for a project. But that's not reality. We've got needs in all of our buildings, we've got needs with our transportation. So it's always weighing what's best ultimately for kids and for the school district to keep us going in the right direction.
I want to ask Daryl too, if I could, how many buses are on the road every day? I'm just curious. 48. Is that down any? I mean, have you cut any out over the last couple of years or no? Or is that kind of about
Well,
normal?
before I took over, we had 62, I want to say. I mean, it was up around
So
60-something.
substantially.
We've lost a lot of
Okay.
routes and stuff.
So there's 48. That's still quite
And
a
that's
few.
not counting your activity buses that we take for the sports teams and that kind of stuff. So
Okay.
And you had talked earlier about using maybe some of the when we were talking at the last meeting, when we saw the demographics of where the kids lived in the county, about using some of those smaller buses to replace some of the instead of picking up kids on the huge bus, just on a regular activity bus, because there weren't so many children in the area to pick up. Do the activity buses fall into this category also, or are they basically separate? And what's the cost differentiation between that?
If you look on there, and what is it called? The cost of an activity bus is about $93,000. One of the buses there listed is for an activity bus.
So they're considerably less expensive?
Yes.
And I'm assuming we quote different supplier,
Pardon?
different vendors on buses.
We actually, there is a statewide bid list for school buses. It's run through the Central Indiana Service Center. They get quotes on 3, at least, major bus manufacturers. We do, generally speaking, we have went with the lowest one, but we also try to standardize that we're not gonna go with bus brand A this year and bus brand B next year, and bus brand C the third year, where you're mixing and matching parts and trying to keep multiple supplies. So we do try to standardize here within the district, but it goes through a bid process for buses across the state to give us the best price we can get on those.
Jerry, it'll give us the bottom line, and it'll put what this charge is, where this charge is on each company, everything, so you can really compare the seats, the lights, the everything on each one of them. And then we try to stick with the same brand because we don't want to stock parts for each one of the 3, which has to be a little much.
Yeah.
Does the state use that as leverage?
They don't lose the state doesn't use necessarily leverage to us.
No, the bus
But
manufacturer.
yes, they do to the bus manufacturers, because, I mean, if you're on the bus list, you're looking at thousands of buses a year. And if you're just if you're just bidding to Fayette County Schools, you're looking at 5 buses a year. So, yeah, that's where they're using the power of multiple school districts throughout the state. I mean, every school district does not go through that, but the large majority of them do use the state buy list for buses.
Speedway doesn't go through that.
We'll let them pay rent on ours, so get us here to beat them in a football game. I mean, really.
Anything else on that? I'll go to the next one. Capital projects plan. This is one looking at what are the big ticket items that we're going to be looking at over the next 3 years. Some of this is pretty well standard. If you look at the technology, we've pretty well put $400,000 in there every year towards technology equipment in a non-instructional sector, and then $400,000 in there for instructional sector. We're looking at, we know we're going to need to replace boilers at Little Spartan. We put in a set fee for classroom furniture. The scrubbers, we look at some equipment for maintenance and custodial there. Some of the other ones are maybe more on the wish list, and I'm going to kind of group a couple of them here. We're looking at least thinking about money there for an athletic locker room, $500,000 at the football field. Another one, if you look at the very bottom of that list, we're kind of putting a placeholder in there for $1 million for bleachers at the football field. That is one of those that I know Scott and I have went back and forth like, are you kidding me? But for that many seats and that type of thing, it is not a low-cost item.
It's a big liability.
That's where we're looking at. So what we end up with, we'll be progressing along with that further. Looking at just HVAC needs district-wide, putting money in there. A smaller one actually is a tire changing equipment. This is one anything over $25,000 we put on there. This is one where it would allow our mechanics to change tires and do work that right now we're sending out. The cost of that, we would actually save the money in what, 2 years, 3 years, something like that. That provides a pretty quick return on investment. Put money in there for furniture, casework. We're looking at, one of the needs we have is just, we've allocated $200,000 in there for maintenance of our asphalt, I'll call it that, whether it's parking lot, sidewalks, all of those kind of things throughout the district. Money in there for a maintenance vehicle. One I really want to highlight right now, electrical and LED lighting upgrades. We've put $650,000 in there, but we have a meeting, Daryl and I have in the next week or two. There's a lot of, what we've been told, there's some really good rebates out there through companies that work through Duke Energy. And again, it's one of those that we would see, from what we're being told now, we would see better lighting, as well as we would see a tremendous decrease in our electrical needs by doing those. Cafeteria upgrades of equipment. This is one that, even with the work we did at the middle school and the work that we did at the high school, or the remodels of the high school, we are still, we're still being under penalty from the state because we still have too large of a balance in our cafeteria fund. So they are requesting that we spend $300,000, spend down our cafeteria funds by another $300,000. So we're looking at what do we do with that. So some of it's going to go to equipment and those kind of things in the cafeteria. And then we have a need for exhaust fans. And actually some of this ties in even with the cafeteria that we're looking at. Some of the exhaust fans are over the cafeteria area, particularly at the high school, that we may be able to use some of those cafeteria excess funds as they determine it to be able to take it off of other budgets where we have it. So those are some of the large projects that we're looking at over the next 3 years. Outside of the building, I mean, this kind of stuff is more of the day-to-day and regular things. These are, again, not the phrases and not the pools. It's just, what do we need to do to maintain the facilities as we have them?
And do we have plans for all these, or this is just a budgetary?
This is just a budgetary. We do not have any specific prices on any of these at this time.
Okay.
So this is just giving us a little more than rough estimate of
A little bit of a roadmap.
of where we need to go.
Correct. Now as we move into just the other budget things, and some of this is, well, I think for everybody here now is a repeat. I think, Ryan, you were here last year, right? For this? I started in January.
Right.
Oh, this is new and exciting for you then. The four major school district funds, the education fund, operations fund, debt service fund, and the rainy day fund. We'll talk about each one of them in more detail as we go here. Now I'm going to start doing something I probably haven't done much in the 3 years I've presented these. I'm going to give a little bit of bad news and a little bit of moaning, I guess you could say, on that. Looking at the budget for this coming year, when we originally looked at, if you look at the enrollment figures from 2014 through the 23-24 is not our official ADM yet. That's about where we are today, but our count day is not officially until October the 2nd, so that will go up, down. That will still be tweaked between now and then. Originally, when we were looking at this year, and some of our financial projections were based on a total of 2,990 students. So we're about 40 students below what we were anticipating. If you look there at the cost, the base cost of a student this year is $7,584. So that means that when we talked about projections, the state were saying you're going to get about $1 million in new money, and we already took $200,000 off of that for textbook costs, because we talked about the state did not give us enough to cover all of our textbook costs. Also, then out of that million, you're looking at about $400,000 less off of that, also due to a lower enrollment than what we had anticipated. So I'll talk about the good news where we are. I think the level where we're starting is good news, but that's one bit of bad news, that our enrollment just decreased a lot more this year than than we anticipated. We've got some really good numbers at the kindergarten, first grade. Are those going to keep up? I don't know. And our high school, middle school numbers are kind of at the trough, so to speak. So I don't know if there are any questions about enrollment.
I mean, I know we're seeing kindergarten first a jump, but is there any other age ranges where we're seeing a jump, or is this consistent each grade level?
There was a noticeable jump. I mean, our first and second grades, there was a big jump for whatever the reasons. We're hoping those continue, but we're not going to. I mean, we're not all of a sudden gonna jump from 220 kids as freshmen to 270 kids as freshmen. I mean, you know, the numbers on up there are pretty well where we're going to expect them to be. But we did lose a few more kids here than we expected this year.
We have some smaller grade level cohorts that are working their way through, and they're starting to impact the high school, middle school. I mean, if we look at where those groups are in upper elementary, going into middle school, we'll be below 900 kids at the high school here before too long. And middle schools, there are, what are they, 460-ish? 450.
Right, 450, 460, Brian?
So that, as those move through, typically kids will leave from the high school cohorts, with those numbers drop. So hopefully these bigger groups coming up in our kindergarten first, that'll continue the next few years and our numbers will boost back up. So that's optimistically what we're hoping, but we saw that our elementary numbers are pretty stable from last year. It's our secondary numbers that are down as these smaller groups of kids move through.
And do we look at the Little Spark preschool as well? Do we monitor that?
We do monitor that, but those are they are not reflected in, we don't receive general fund funding
I
from
don't know
it.
if that's any indication of what's potentially coming as well.
Yes, that helps us tremendously to get an idea on the numbers. It's not a one meeting, you know, the number of 4-year-olds don't exactly equate to the number of 5-year-olds, but it does help us.
We had a lot of kids show up at our elementaries that had never been in a preschool program.
I had like 12 that were just, nobody knew about in kindergarten. Like, they just came out of different counties and different states and, yeah, or didn't have preschool at all. So I had like 12 that we didn't know that were coming. Yeah.
Have we done any, and maybe it's because I'm an upper grade person, have we done any research on where these kids are that we're losing between 5th and 6th grade to 7th and 8th and then on into high school? Do we have any sense of why we're losing these kids? What are we losing them to? Are we losing them to people moving out of the county? Are we losing them to homeschool? Are we losing them to other school districts around that are recruiting our kids? And some of them are.
And I don't think it's just they're leaving when they hit middle school. It's these groups were small in the elementaries too.
Okay.
So that's it. It's more of these were lower cohorts of kids. The birth rates were lower in the county.
Okay.
What a lot of that is.
So we're just dealing with, we didn't have the larger group to begin with. We're not really percentage-wise losing that many kids because we didn't have as many to start with.
Exactly. Some of the grade levels are down 30, 40 kids. So that adds up when they get into middle school and high school.
Yeah. Just curious.
Right.
Hopefully the kids that we have now in kindergarten and 1st and 2nd grade will decide to hang around for the next 10 years.
Next one, budget estimates. This is what is in the proposal. I'll go into more detail on each of these numbers. Rainy day fund, that is a fund that is, there's no tax dollars go into it. It's only what we transfer into it from either operations or education fund. Debt service fund, I'll talk definitely more details on that. That's a really high number, and I'll explain. Education fund's a little bit higher than last year. Operation fund, this is actually the same number I proposed last year for a total of 44 million, but all of these get broken down as we go through the process. Next one, education fund. We'll start with that. That's the biggest fund that we have. The funds for the education fund, this is solely supported from state tax dollars. These are, while some of them come locally, obviously, these are, education fund is supported by state income tax, gambling tax, business taxes. All of those taxes go into the state of Indiana, and then they get dispersed out based on the formula. I gave the idea of what the base per student is. Then there's some other trickling of it, but this education fund is equally distributed based on student enrollment through all of the schools throughout Indiana. Some of the major expenses that come out of the education fund are the ones really that go almost directly into the classroom. Teacher salaries, principal salaries, instructional assistants, secretaries, the athletic coaches, student technology, building supplies. Going on, this is where does it come from? It comes from the basic tuition, also advanced placement grant, which used to be known as the honors grant, special ed grant, and the career tech ed grant. So those are the main sources of funding that ultimately result in how much money that we have coming into our education fund. Looking at that for 2024, the basic grant will bring in approximately $22 million. The advanced placement brings in $67,000. This is actually a little bit lower than it was. I think last year we proposed $75,000, I believe. Special ed grant of $2.2 million, and then the CTE grant of $646,000. On all of these funds that I do, the one thing to remind you of is on the case of all of these, when the board approves the budget going forward, there's still one level of approvals required for a budget from a school district, and that is it has to go to the DLGF. Our local DLGF person will look at our budget and make sure that we have the money to support it. And in the case of the education fund, the debt service fund, and the operations fund, he will cut every one of those budgets. And that's his job. I mean, my job at this point in the boards is to put in enough money that we cover what we want, knowing that they are going to cut the budget. As I've worked with Mr. Hudson with the DLGF, he's local and has been outstanding to work with. He has made it clear to me, make sure you ask for more than you want, because my job is to make sure that there's the supporting tax base to cover all of this. So we go in high with all of these. Realistically, this it's actually about $25 million there. It'll probably be cut to $24 million or something like that. About $1 million will probably come off this when it's approved. Eventually, before the end of the year, generally, we get what's called a 1782 notice, and that's the notice from the DLGF of here's how much money you do have to spend for next year.
What is covered by the advanced placement grant?
That is mainly looking at our students that are taking advanced placement classes, honor students, and those kind of things. That's based on high school and graduation.
Okay, so would this go into help defraying the cost of the teachers that are teaching the advanced placement classes?
It's not a one-to-one relationship. Really, all of this money goes into one pot. I mean, the special ed and the CTE do have their own line items, but the advanced placement grant goes into the education fund, and we do support those teachers via the contract. Those teachers that teach advanced placement classes do get additional money at the high school based on the classes they teach there.
In the special ed grant, this county over the years has had an unusual number of special education students given the entire student population. Our population has been much higher. So this special education grant, is that just kind of a flat number they come up with, or is it really based on how many special education kids we have within our district?
There is what's called a December 1 count, and special ed has a separate count in December 1, and we get a certain amount of money from the state based on the need of those. So a learning disabled student gets one amount, a student that's in a life skills class gets a higher amount. So based on what the state sets up as the need at the various levels of disability there, then we get the funding for that. So ours is a little bit higher because I don't want to say we're an abnormal number, but we are high. We are above the state average when it comes to our special ed population. So that's how the special ed grant comes in. It's based on that differing amount. The same is true also of the CTE grant. While we get Career Tech Ed money, there are some jobs and some professions that the state has said these are more important and we get more money for, and there's some that they say they're important, but they're not as important, so we get less money for. So we don't get, it's not, the CTE grant and special ed grants are not just looking at, you have this number of students and it's this amount of money. They're looking at these students with the needs that they have and give differing amounts based on those needs.
Thank you.
Moving on a little bit to property tax, being, like I said, the education fund, that's all coming from the state. Now we're looking at where are we with property taxes, property tax caps, etc. Couple things to notice from this for this year. First off, the circuit breaker. It's the first time in, 6 or 8 years. Last year, our circuit breaker, the kind of layman's definition is if we collected the full amount of property tax from every single person in our taxing district, which is all of Fayette County, then this is the amount of money we would receive. But due to tax caps, meaning there's a 1% tax cap on homeowners, 2% for other lanes, 3% tax cap on businesses, there are some people that, many people in this county are over the tax cap, which means, as a homeowner, that's the most prevalent, is that if the tax cap is set at 1%, if your tax would be at 1.3%, you're only going to pay 1%. So the difference there, that $1.9 million, almost $2 million, is the money we lose to tax caps, meaning those are people that, if you looked at just our tax rate, they would be paying more, but it is capped out due to the Constitution in Indiana. But what I wanted to point out is our tax cap dropped this year by about $400,000. So that is a combination of, mainly the combination of our net assessed valuation, we'll talk about that later, increased enough that some people's houses increased or businesses increased in the net assessed valuation. Therefore, the amount that they could pay would creep a little bit higher because their assessed valuation of their property, whatever that may be, went higher. So this is the first time that's decreased since, 2017 to 2018. So that just, it will bring in a little bit more to us. Here's the numbers on the assessed valuation, showing that, I think the number, if you look at 22 to 23, I can't remember our percentage, it went up about 14%, I believe, from 22 to 23. The increased net assessed valuation from 23 to 24 is about 9.8%, I believe, somewhere there. So for the school district, that's a good thing to see property values increasing throughout the county. Debt service fund, and here's where I want to go into a little bit more detail. You'll see on there that it says the middle school bond. This is the, what is it? Ann tells us
the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah. I'd say keeps on taking. I'm going to skip anticipated debt just a second. The common school construction loan. This is the construction loan mainly used for the field house. And if you look at the unreimbursed textbooks, this is money from last year that we are still allowed to take that from debt service to pay us back for students that did not pay for textbooks for some reason in the past. So that amount's in there. But I want to really bring notice to the anticipated debt service that says $2.3 million. Again, without all of the exact figures, DLGF, the recommendation from there is put a really high number on it because I'm going to cut you to what you need. That number, ultimately, the anticipated debt service is to cover what we're looking at doing between Frazee and the pool, that two $6.1 million bonds, which will be bonds going into the future. So as the board takes the legal steps at our next couple of board meetings to do that, ultimately when we get to our November board meeting, hopefully the board then approves, here's what we're going to borrow, Then when it goes out, we find out what the tax rates, or we find out what's gonna be the cost of those bonds, what's the interest rates, all of those kind of things, and then it will trickle down to, I am anticipating that the debt service rate there is gonna be closer to, I think it's 1.1 or $1.2 million. It's gonna be a long way from the $2.3 million that you see up there. But that's just, again, you put a lot there, you know it's gonna come off, and it's really going, that ultimate rate is going to be determined by the actions of the board. And the other thing, and I talk about it, I think on my very last slide, but that number will also come down to, we've been keeping right there at that 30-cent rate. That is also based on, we're gonna be back at that 30-cent rate. So we're gonna keep that tax rate relatively flat, it'll go up or down a penny or two. But really, we're looking at where are we on debt service to keep it at that 30-cent rate and maintain where we've been.
And if I'm recalling correctly, the middle school bond, because it's eventually in the next few years going to be paid off, that's why we can borrow the money. We've taken off one debt so we can acquire another one.
Yeah, well, and part of the thing, really the anticipated debt, if you remember, we started the process last year, we did a general obligation bond last year that we used for the project still going on at the high school, and that was, we paid it off in 1 year. So that bond is dropping off after 2023, and then we're rolling that money into, and we're gonna extend it out longer this time than we did with the 22 GO bond. These will be longer term because they're higher amounts.
I think we said 10, 15 years, 10 years.
This just shows where we've been, debt service, and then the numbers prior to, from 22 back are the real numbers. 23, 24 were the budgeted numbers. Like I said, 2023, we actually came in at, I think, $2.3 million. We will be somewhere around that point when we're all done, or when we're all finished with the actual of 2024. This is just a little bit of education on all of this stuff that we go through. One of the things, our operations fund, currently we transfer 15% of our education funds into the operations fund. That is really the maximum that the state wants us to go up to. We can do less than that. I think that's something we're constantly monitoring. Is 15% too much? Should we lower it? We'll look at all those, but right now we take 15% out of our education fund and we transfer it into operations fund to help that. Okay, what else in the operations fund? The operations fund is made up of a couple things. It's made up of local property tax. It is made up of the transfers into the education fund. You're going to see the advertised amount for it is $12 million. I'm anticipating they're going to cut us back to about $10 million. And further on to that is that with the circuit, I mean, that's kind of the difference in the circuit breaker. If we were able to collect the full tax rate amount, we would be closer to that $12 million. So that's where the circuit breaker comes in. And just reminding everybody, we are somewhere in the top 5% of school districts hit percentage-wise by circuit breaker. It affects us more than most other school districts in the state. What all do we purchase out of, or pay for out of operations fund? Just think of all of the stuff that we need to run a school district that isn't in the classroom directly. Transportation costs, capital projects, bus purchases, our insurance, our utilities, educational support, pretty much all of this office and the maintenance, transportation, all of that's paid out of operations fund. So all of that goes into that part. The rainy day fund, this is one, saves it for a rainy day. Really, it's kind of money that we put over there and somewhat ignore. We're looking to probably build that up a little bit over the next year and take steps to move forward with that. Summary and comments, some things looking ahead. At the end of next year, December 15th of 2024, that will be the end of the ESSER funds. ESSER 2 ends with December 15th of this year. ESSER 3 ends next year. So that's going to be creating a whole new set of problems, especially going into the 25 budget with some of the personnel. How are we going to sustain some of the programs that we've created, that we've been able to use ESSER funds? I think we've done a great job creating some programs that we've found beneficial. We have also been able to put a significant number of dollars or significant dollars into the infrastructure of a lot of our buildings. There's a lot of HVAC needs that we have done at Spartanburg, Fayette Central, Everton. Those are probably the three main ones, and I know we've touched on HVAC in every single one of our buildings and used ESSER funds. So those are going to be gone. The debt stabilization is just, we're continually talking about how do we keep that tax rate flat. So that's always there. The projects, looking ahead to that. Fayette Central, or Frazee and the pool, as we look at projects, what are we doing there? And the teacher contract. We will start bargaining with that next week and then see where we are on the teacher contract. And as I said, it's not as rosy as it has been in the past. I'll leave it, my comments kind of there. Whenever I get to the fund report eventually, I'll talk a little bit more on even where we are with some of the funds and where we go forward with that.
Okay,
If
thank
any
you,
other
Mr.
questions?
Harris. Yeah. Does anyone else have anything else to add? No? Okay. All right, moving on. To iLearn data. Is this Casaro?
Okay. All right, so I told you when we were talking earlier about school improvement plans, we have 2 years of iLearn data that we feel is data that we can reflect on and make some instructional decisions and how we deliver instruction to our students in order to increase student achievement. Although COVID has kind of made schooling a little different, we've had to address a lot of the mental health issues of kids coming back from COVID. Student achievement is always our number one priority. And so we're going to present tonight the data. I have my administrators here because we're going to own it. We don't love it, but together we believe that we can make a difference and we're going to change this. And so tonight this is more just about presenting what our vision is, what we're going to put in place and where we are, and then we'll come back after we implement some of these, and our goal is to see all of our data go up. So starting with our vision for increasing student achievement. If you've been with Scott and I since the beginning, we started when we came aboard with the Marzanos high reliability schools. You know, what are we doing to ensure that the things that we're doing for kids are increasing student achievement? So we decided the first 3 levels of Marzano, and I gave you your copy because it's kind of hard to see on the screen. But that first level of Marzano is that safe and collaborative culture. Some of the initiatives that we put in as a district, and we put a lot in with ESSER, is the restorative practices. We have restorative facilitators, we have reset rooms, we're doing morning meetings. Those were things that we felt we needed to address after COVID and with the number of kids coming to us with trauma. So that's one initiative that falls under that Marzano level 1. PLCs is just planning with administrators and teachers and looking at data. What does it say? What do we need to change? What's working? What's not working? So those are district initiatives that fall under that level 1. Level 2 is effective teaching in all classrooms. That's providing an evaluation tool that makes significant change in how teachers are delivering instruction, giving them constructive feedback. We work with EES on walkthroughs and how we teach some of our teachers that are coming to us with very little preparation in the education field to become better at the craft. And then the third level is that guaranteed and viable curriculum. With 5 elementaries, it is critical that we have a strong tier 1, and it doesn't matter whether you're at Grandview Elementary or you're at Fayette Central Elementary, you're getting the same guaranteed curriculum because our kids move so much. We have a very transient elementary population. So some of our initiatives with working with EES, you've heard, is the curriculum maps, and the CFAs. CFAs are just short assessments that when you go through a unit and you identify what the priority standards are for that unit, then you assess to make sure that the kids know and are able to do what you expect them to do at the end of that lesson. It's kind of like a little dipstick to make sure that we're doing things right. If kids aren't getting it, and the majority of kids aren't getting it, then it's about reteaching. If it's a small group of kids, then it's about doing that intervention. So with those Marzano levels and some of the district initiatives, we're hoping that now is the time over the last 5 years. Our goal was to implement all this in 3 years. COVID happened, so it's taken us 5. But we really feel like this is the first year that we have all of those practices in place. We've done all of the professional development. Now our goal is to see that all funnel into student achievement.
Can you explain what Marzano?
Marzano is just a researcher, and what it is about high reliability organizations, things that organizations do to prevent failure. It's about reflecting on your practice to make sure that if you have an error, that you correct it, and that you don't continue to do it and see the same results. So it's not really anything new. Marzano's been around in the educational world for many, many years, but it's just about research-based practices that support student achievement.
And tier 1 instruction is
Your basic.
your classroom instruction, and if your tier 1's not strong, that's the foundational
Yeah.
piece, is what your teachers do with their classes each day. And then you get into tier 2, which is small group more
Yeah.
intensive support.
80% of your kids should be responsive to tier 1. That's the majority of your kids. 20%, they will say, will be responsive to tier 2, which is small group instruction, additional support. And then the other percentage is kids that need IEPs, need additional intensive intervention. So it's kind of like a triangle. But you want to guarantee that tier 1 that you're doing this very strong tier 1 instruction, because you want to get 80% of those kids mastering those standards that the state says they need to master, either from a grade level to a grade level, or if you have content like Algebra 1, Algebra 2, Geometry, they need to have those fundamental standards mastered before they go into the next content sequence. So what we decided as a group is, okay, now that we know that we have all of these initiatives in place and they're supposed to increase student achievement, what are our desired outcomes as a group? What are we trying to, as a corporation, not as an individual buildings, but as a corporation, what are we desiring the outcomes to be? So you can see that the desired outcomes, 80% of K through 9 students will be at or above grade level RIT on NWEA. And if you remember NWEA, we give it 3 times a year. It's a norm reference score, so everybody that takes the test in the state or in the nation all get a score, and then they get an average score, and then they'll identify for a first grader, they need to be at this score in order to be considered at grade level RIT. So we are trying to really push our teachers to really get our kids at that grade level RIT. We've had some gaps. We've talked about growth, and growth is important, but it's really important to have the majority, again, that 80% of your kids responding to your tier 1. If we're not seeing that, then we need to make changes in our tier 1 instruction. So that's where that outcome comes from. I-READ 3, if you read the paper, the state is pushing, there was a decline in the state scores of I-READ 3 and the amount of third graders being able to pass that test. We too have seen a decline, and you'll see that as we come up. So our goal is that 90% of our third grade students will pass I-READ 3. I-Learn scores will be at or above state averages in grades 3 through 8 for ELA, math, and biology. And then for the high school, we'd like to see our ECA scores be at state average as well as our SAT scores. So those are the desired outcomes. So with all of the initiatives that we've put in place and all of the work that we're doing with our teachers, at the end we want to see these desired outcomes. So where are we right now? And this is, again, we're going to own this data. It's not where we want to be, but it is where we are. And I think part of getting better at anything is just looking at where you're starting and then going from there. So we'll start with I-Learn ELA in the spring of 2023. The red line is the state average, which is significantly low as well. It's 37.9%. You can see each individual school, including CMS, because we still give iLearn to middle school. We used to give it to ninth graders, we do not anymore, so they will not have a ninth grade. You can see that we have 2 schools that are at or above the state average, but we have 4 that are below state average, and we have a couple that are significantly below. The middle school, we have already made some changes. We were pushing a strong tier 2, and we had added 2 remediation courses, and we felt like we needed to push them back to tier 1, so we have put those teachers into a general classroom, and we're really working to support tier 1, because you gotta have tier 1 before you can work on tier 2. So you can see the middle school is significantly below, and we're really working to make changes on that. Next one, iLearn Math. As a district, we do perform higher in math. With our curriculum mapping and our CFAs, we are a year ahead with math, so we have been able to use that data one more year for math and ELA, so we were excited to see that our math scores were closer to state average in more of our schools, because what we're doing is slowly working. It's like dieting. It would be great to lose 20 pounds in a week, but it's not realistic. Data is the same way. You got to make those small increment steps so that the things that you're putting in place are effective and they're consistent. And you can see that we have 1, 2, almost 3 schools that are at or above, well, because 36, they really should be there. Everton, Fayette Central, and Frazee. But you can see the other schools, the other 2 elementaries aren't too far behind, but again, we're still struggling with CMS being at 17%. And again, we took that tier 2 math course, and the teacher that was in there was very effective at using MWA to drive instruction, and she is now teaching a tier 1 course, so we're hoping to see some increase in that score. Absolutely.
Why such a drop in the CMS in comparison to the elementary averages?
It is what it is.
Age of
Even if you
kids.
do all the elementaries, you average it
No,
out.
it's the nature of the beast. And I will say that, and I love them, and everybody in this room knows that I love middle school kids. But it's the nature of the beast. When they come into 7th grade, it is culturally and educationally such a shift for so many of these kids. Expectation-wise, just they've been in this cocoon for the last 6 or 7 years. And it's developmentally, they are semi-ready for a lot of this, but a lot of times their brains and their bodies, they're not working. There's a really good book, Mr. Liggett gave it to me last year, and I can't remember the title of it, but it was great, about teenage brains and how they work and the expectations. And I think sometimes we look at middle school kids, their physical size and where they are on that continuum belies where they are educationally. And they're just, some of them are just not ready. They're going through, you've got the hormone stages going on. So my problem with any standardized test like this for anybody is that this is a snapshot of one particular day. And the legislature doesn't really want to look at the validity of the iLearn test, and if you look at the research of that, even from people out of Ball State, IU, it's not necessarily a valid test, but clearly we have to work with it. So I think all those things combining together, it's not that the middle school teachers do a bad job. That's combat pay some days with the kids, because they're just not, they're not there yet. So this is a transitional period. Middle school is like kindergartners on hormones. And when you think about that, developmentally, the kids are going to develop as much between birth and age 5 as they do from like 12 to 15, which is middle school age. So you look at, you don't expect a 2-year-old to do things yet. So I think sometimes we have some unrealistic expectations of what, it's not that they can't do it, they can, and we try very, very hard to do that, but I think it's just very difficult, and the test, the iLearn test isn't necessarily a well-constructed test for that age group.
And I was gonna say, that's an average for the state.
Yeah.
I think if you separated that for the state, you'd probably see the same thing. The middle school
Yeah.
is typically
right.
a little
And
lower everywhere because
Probably, but
that's,
we definitely agree we could be higher than that.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and what we're doing is we're looking at making some tier 1 changes, because when you have that number that low, that's not a tier 2, that's not just a small group of kids, that's either the curriculum resources that we're using or how we're delivering instruction to those kids. So that's why we're taking this data, and that our first step was to move back from focusing on smaller groups to that larger tier 1, because we are significant, and we've dropped in the last couple of years. I'm not gonna, we all have our opinions about the test. It is what it is. It's right now our measure.
Same test.
But we all take the same test, so,
So, I mean,
and we all have kids who are trauma-based.
but that is why I think it'd
Oh,
be
I
interesting
don't
to
disagree.
see what those numbers were for just middle school across the
Well-
state and see where we really are.
Oh, like compare us to, yeah, and I can do that. Next month, I could compare us to our neighboring districts of what their middle school's
Right.
performance. I think you will find that overall that they may be lower than their elementaries, but like I said, we're looking at us,
Right.
and we're not happy with that, and we're gonna do what
No.
we can to move forward with that.
I think the move out of tier 2 and moving it back into tier 1, and giving the extra instructional aid right there in the tier 1 program, I think
Touches more kids.
a much, I think that's just a much more effective way to do it, because there, you can hit a lot more kids that you don't really realize are where they are.
Right.
Because on any given day, they could be at one place, but if you have that extra assistance in the classroom with that, you can monitor the kids much more carefully.
Yeah.
And so we don't have, the tier 2 kids they clearly slipped through the cracks, but how many of these other kids that are singing in the classroom are shifting at another place? So those kinds of resources being used is really a good deal.
so the 35.7%, that's the state average across all grades? So that we-
When they, because what they do is, as a school, they put all those grades together, and that becomes the average for those
So is
grades.
that
So,
K through 8?
right,
3rd through 8.
3rd through 8.
Or third
I'm
through
just
8,
telling you, I'm showing you how our individual schools stack up to
Yes.
that state average. Now, we could even dig deeper into that and look at how grade levels stack up, because, for example, Fayette Central, they're really high. They could particularly have one grade level that scored really high, which would make their data appear,
It could skew the
it can
data.
skew the data. This is just a quick snapshot of how these schools are performing in comparison to the district or the state average as a whole. Data can be very
It can be manipulated.
manipulate. We're just looking at it, that's our goal right now, is where, because like you said, everybody else has middle schoolers, everybody else has kids like us. Now, the Carmels, the Fishers obviously have a little bit different clientele, but our neighbors pretty much have the same type of students that we serve. So this gives us at least an aim line of where we want to be.
I would be really interested in seeing the data from the surrounding school corps.
I can do that.
From the surrounding
Yeah,
school,
right.
because I think that would be a more accurate picture of where we really are. Because, you know, when you have 80% of your students, parents having college degrees, and you're in Carmel Clay, it's a little bit different than Fayette County.
And they do too. I mean, it's no different than one grade level skewing the data. They can skew the data a little bit. But still, at least you have to have an aim line, and that becomes your aim line for iLearn. The next one is iRead3. I wanted to give you 2 years of data so that you can see the decline. The state average is 82%. Grandview is the only school that made state average. They were consistent both years at 80, I think that's 84, 84, the first year 83. All the other schools, you can see, we were below state average and we did have a decline. We did send all of our students to summer school, minus the kids that would be good cause exemption. Those would be the kids that have IEPs that say that they don't need to take the test again. And we did have some students pass during summer school, but not as many as we have in the past. Not to make excuses, but this is the group that would have been kindergartners during the COVID. So they missed a large portion of their foundational reading instruction, but so did half the state. So again, we're not making excuses. It is what it is. We own it. We recognize that our kids should be performing way better on iRead. It's a pretty fair test. So we have made already some significant changes in our Tier 1 instruction K2 and working with our K2 teachers. So we're hoping to see some significant change in that score at the end of this year. We also give it to our second graders. The state gave us the option to give it to second graders 2 years ago. We do that so that we know who is not. And if they pass it as second graders, they do not have to take it as third graders. So that helps us to identify those kids that are not on target, so we can give them immediate intervention as third graders when they come in.
Kim, could you, why, I don't know that a lot of people understand why iRead at grade 3 is such an important evaluative tool. There's a lot of data out there that says if a student is not reading at grade level by the end of third grade, their chances of being successful beyond that drop precipitously.
The curriculum really changes after third grade. When you're a K2 and even 3 teacher, you're teaching kids to read. And then after that, it's reading to learn. And so the expectation is that they already have those foundational skills. Our kids, and with the help of LSP, one of the probably the strongest things that LSP has brought to us is an understanding of our kids are coming into preschool not as 3-year-olds, but more like 6 months to 8 months. So they're so far behind coming in. The LSP teachers, our title teachers, are doing some of the same instructional resources that we're doing at kindergarten. So we're hoping that we can get early intervention in there and we can start to see an increase in that. And Mallory and her staff they attend to all of our professional developments and they're gung-ho about doing everything they can do to catch kids up. But because of our poverty and some of the needs of our kids, they're coming in so far behind developmentally, we're constantly playing the catch-up game. And then if you know Head Start is not designed to be an academic program. It's a wraparound service. So that's why we added Title I preschool, because it is an academic. It is based on academics, and we're hoping to see some of the benefits of that. We were hoping to see it earlier, but with COVID, a lot of our parents didn't send kids to preschool, so we have some gaps in that data as well.
Well, I think it also points out that COVID happened, but the longitudinal effect that it's going to have on education, particularly those that were very, very young and foundational, it's not a quick fix. No. It's going to take a while for that to do, and the iRead scores at third grade, frankly, are very good. But they're much better than I would have anticipated them being, given the lack of foundation for so many of the kids. So bravo, third grade teachers.
The next one is biology end of course assessment. We still are required to give that once kids are take the biology course. You can see that our biology ECA performance is at state average at 29%. And then the last one is our SAT performance. And you can see that we are at 20, oops, my page is stuck. We are at 20.1 and the state average is 28.8. Last year we did give more of our students the PSAT. Now the SAT is required as our it's not required, it's as our accountability test versus iLearn. So we're kind of making that shift in how do we prepare our kids to do better on SAT. This is a pretty raw number because this was the first year that they really were expected to take SAT for an accountability point for high school. So all of this is just really to educate you guys of where we're at, what we're doing. We recognize it, we own it, and we are determined that we can make a difference, and we will make a difference, and just wanted you guys to be aware of our desired outcomes and where we are. Thank you, and I'll come back with that other data.
Yeah, I would be really,
I can do that.
because in fairness to the teachers and the kids
Absolutely.
here in Fayette County, you gotta kind of compare apples and apples.
Right. And this is not about us saying that what we're doing is, that we're not doing the right things, because we are, but it's about being reflective and making sure that we always continue to do better.
Well, but I think public perception is that if we have kids that, our middle school kids are 17% at math, well, what the heck's going on? What are the teachers not doing? What, it becomes, we in education understand that this is one of the tools, but out there on the street, well, what's the matter with this school? Because we're not having these kids pass, we're not doing, it's reflective that we're not doing our job, and in fact, we're probably doing more work because we have more issues. But, yeah, and it's just it's a really difficult
It is,
situation.
and I think anybody in the world of education would agree that the way teachers and educators are held accountable isn't always equal or fair, but it is what it is, and the best thing we can do is be transparent and continue to reflect on that and continue to push forward and show that the things that we're doing, and it also helps teachers understand why we're doing the things that we're doing, because if you continue to add things to their plate, they want to know why. So the data at least gives us a vehicle to drive what we need to change, and if we're doing something well, then we don't need to change that, we need to continue moving forward. So I get the perception, but it's not about saying that we're doing things wrong, it's about this is where we are, and this is where we want to be.
Perception
I know.
permeates all of our culture right now.
It does.
Yeah.
People don't trust the media,
They
they
don't
don't
trust
trust the government, they don't trust educators. I mean, we're in that
We're in that
state
state
right
line.
now.
Yeah.
And we just have to work hard and try to overcome that perception, but we're up against it.
And I think Ann hit it, because particularly here, and then we're working on, our teachers need to be paid more, but the public sees that, and it's
Right.
kind of a,
But there's a
You know.
lot of things that play into that too.
exactly.
Yeah, it's,
Exactly.
and we're competitive on salaries, and very thankfully, but if you look statewide, the IPS, how many hundred teachers were they short? And the people are not going into education for a variety of reasons. So if we want to maintain, and bringing somebody in out of business to teach, sounds like a really good idea, but sometimes it's not such a good idea, because there's an art to it that you develop.
Yeah,
Yeah.
teaching is a craft.
Teaching is teaching is an art as well as a science.
It is. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, lots of information. Okay. All right, is there any public comments?
I did have a question.
Sure.
Earlier you had spoke about the state not giving enough in the textbook fees back because they covered it this year. How much were we short comparatively to like what we didn't receive from last year? It was like $196,000 or something last year.
There's $196,000 last year that we can collect through property tax. Going forward, we know that the state is going to reimburse the school districts per student at a rate of about $151 per student. Our textbooks, just our normal total cost, that's about $220,000 short of what we need to be level with what our textbook costs are. So while the state said schools are going to pay for it, we're going to give you money to pay for it, they shorted us from what that amount is. And that's for 2 years. So textbook costs are going to go up next year like everything else with inflation goes, at least unless right now, the legislature in their long session set that amount for this year going forward, so I would anticipate we're going to be even more short in 2025 than we will be in 2024.
All right. Report items, superintendent's discussion group reports.
I think the only thing from that is we will begin negotiations. So the representatives from the board, I communicated that with them. We're going to have our first session on September 20th at 4 p.m. here in the boardroom. So I look forward to that, and we have productive, and I think our negotiations go really well. We have a good relationship with our teachers association. So.
Okay, thank you. Principal directors reports. Brian.
Next Thursday, September 21st, Everton is having our literacy night. It begins at 6 o'clock. Just wanted to invite cabinet and board.
Thank you.
Also, I do want to mention one other thing. We started this reading incentive this week, and it's football themed. And I got the call from Andrea and some CHS athletes, so our kids are pumped up to read right now.
That's cool. Oh, that's wonderful.
Come and check it out.
Wonderful. Thank you, Brian.
So
Mrs.
we,
Phillips.
Fayette Central recently had our first literacy night as well, our Title I event, Let's Glow Read. So our families were reading under glow lights. We had well over 300 people attend, and so it was a great event. And then our PTO Carnival's coming up October 6th.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
We have something we have never done before, because we have such a large kindergarten population, and sometimes it's harder to get to know families in such a large population, and we're having a kindergarten connection night. So sometimes when you have family nights, it's hard to cater to kindergarten and a sixth grader. So we're doing a night just focused on our kindergarten families. So September 26th at 5 o'clock, please come out and join us. We're excited just to get to know our kindergarten families because they're the future of our school, so we're just trying to start off with some strong connections.
Great, that sounds fun. Thank you. Mrs. McCurry.
This Thursday at 5:45, we are having our Title I meeting, and we've invited all parents. It's in combination with our PTO meeting, and it's a great time to explain to parents how Title I supports our students and all the interventions that we're doing and how those were set up. So I'm really excited to share that with the parents so they know that we're doing more besides that Tier 1 learning.
Great, thank you.
Well, I might as well not be the last elementary school to have.
You see the competitiveness?
Have done a one school, one book initiative because of Winn-Dixie. The kids are all reading it with their families. The teachers are also reiterating that in the classrooms. We have like trivia every morning. Kids are loving it, and we're going to have our literacy night based off the book, September 21st at 5 o'clock. We even have Puppy Love 4-H Club coming out to do a demonstration. It's going to be, our kids are so excited, families are excited, teachers are excited, so thank you.
Wonderful, lots of exciting things
Okay.
going on in elementary.
I was trying. So I want to thank the board for your approval of the baseball field. If you haven't been out there, I'm sorry for my tardiness this evening. I thought it was at 6:30. But stop it, Daryl. I do appreciate you approving that. There's been a lot of work. We had a big discussion today about moving forward and what it's going to look like. We're really excited about the product, hopefully that we get out of it, and it'll be something to be proud of. A couple of announcements. Yes, we are working with Everton with the football initiative. We are also, the SAC students are working with Fayette Central. We plan to be at Fayette Central on October 31st to present our richer principles. So our kiddos are working on a presentation on respect for K2 and then 3-6. And then something to kind of, that should be coming your way pretty soon, we're gonna plan a track or treat instead of a trunk or treat. And so our student athletes are going to set up some little areas around the track because it's well lit. And the hope is on October the 28th from 6 to 8, we will invite the community, hopefully ages little up to no older than 6th grade. But the intent is that all of our sports teams will be present around the track and be able to have a safe alternative for trick or treating for some of our kids. So that information should be coming over to your offices within the next week, and so, just something that our kiddos wanna do to give back to the community.
That's awesome.
Andrea, you gonna dress up that night? Okay.
Yeah, I'll be scary.
Okay.
That was a good answer.
Scary athletic director.
A couple of things, high school, I know Ms. Plum has a few things, but I'd like to thank the board for giving the approval for the dedication of the bench and plaque for Curtis Griffin. If you didn't know Curtis, he was a longtime head custodian at the high school and a board member, and he's changed a lot of lives. The bench itself was set and processed by Elsa Duty, which is class of 2001 representative. She contacted me last year and went through the board, got approval and all that, and we set the bench right by the gate where most of the kids pass on a given day. And every time I see that bench, I think of Curtis. So that's one positive thing. Second thing is we use cap and gown monies, free monies, to purchase mats for each exit door in the high school. We have them in. If you haven't seen them, come see them. They have Spartan wording and Spartan head on there, so come out and see those. The next initiative started last year's banners on each pole. On the banners on each pole on the campus, we're going to have our richer principles. Those are respect, integrity, caring, harmony, excellence, and responsibility. The Career Center is doing that. It was paid for last year, so there's no money out of this year's funds. And lastly, but not leastly, Mr. Russell here, I'd like to thank him. He's been helping me with the ALICE safety training with the different schools. We were at Eastview today, and middle school and high school, and the middle Spartan preschool recently, so he's really added his perspective to safety, so I'd like to thank him.
Excuse me, just wanted to give a shout out to our marching band and guard. They had some success over the weekend at their competition, and just so I don't mess it up, I have it in my notes. An outstanding visual, outstanding effects, overall first place Scholastic Class A. So we are proud of the start of their competition season, and just thank you to all of our teachers at the high school and the corporation. Everybody's pulling together and doing what's best for kids.
Thank you.
Brian's
going
Shout out to all of those of you in this room, and even behind me here, and so many others out in the community that participated in Challenge Day after the school a week ago. It's a huge undertaking. It's funded by Reed Hospital. It's well worth the investment that goes to all of our 8th grade kids. Those of you that participate, that are part of it, you know how important it is with those middle school kids who sometimes struggle with relational type things. And it really helps to break down some barriers, really realizing that we're all kind of dealing with some of the same things, closing some of those gaps, and just really helping our kids with empathy. But appreciate, I know Scott was there, I know Ann was there, and some of you from the board were there. I think we had administrators from all of the other schools as well. But I certainly appreciate, I know Keith Morey is the one who spearheaded that a long time ago, and Ms. Fuller, Rebecca Fuller is another one who really just worked all summer long to get that thing put together, because we have to have 25 volunteers every single day. But it really went out without a hitch. But appreciate all of your support as well. It's just very good for our group of kids. Thank you very much.
Question for Andrea. Andrea, what about homecoming? I've seen some stuff on the feed that we're doing some things a little bit differently this year.
So yeah, homecoming week is next week. I haven't seen if they're doing dress-up days or not. I would assume that they are. I know Ms. Blum probably knows a little bit more about the day-to-day and the week stuff. I know Wednesday we're doing homecoming Olympics during the school day. The kiddos will go to 1 through 4, and then I think we dismiss around 1 to go down to the football field to do that. And then the parade for homecoming is going to be on Friday. So most of our kiddos have SRE at the end of the day. And so we're gonna start the parade right at 3:30. It'll start at Ivy Tech, and it kind of has a little parade route. I think Sydney Job has flyers that she's gonna start putting up and around to let people know what the route is. I think we have 18 floats currently in it. We've encouraged all of our teams to be a part of that. So.
You'll get an email with details tomorrow. So,
Oh, well, it's, Kim Geesting put it on the,
Yeah, it's on the feed.
on the feed, and I'm thinking, we haven't done a parade like that in years.
Yes, so our homecoming committee was gung-ho after last year about making things very school spirit and positive, and they've been working hard the last year to make some changes to get more students involved. So that's why homecoming Olympics are during the school day instead of in the evening, so more students have the opportunity to participate this year. So we're thankful for all the hard work that they put into making this happen next week.
And we haven't had a parade outside the school grounds in years. That used to be a really cool thing. They would come down by the middle school and into downtown and with all the floats and the like. So that's really, I'm glad to see that resurrected. That's really a lot of fun.
If any of you are interested in being a freshman class sponsor, we are in need of 2 of them because the freshman class has no one. So if any of you, Mr. Collins, if you'd like to be the freshman class sponsor.
Wow, no pressure, Collins.
No pressure.
No pressure.
We'll talk after the meeting.
That's a see me.
See me.
See me.
So the parade route is gonna go from Ivy Tech, 21st Street, down to Grand, to 20th Street, over to Park, and down Central. So
Cool, so it'll be down, so I'm assuming we've got the downtown merchants and the like, and those people on board. But the kids used to decorate windows and put up banners and stuff like
I
that.
don't know about, but I know that's the route we're taking. We can't go down in front of the middle school because we have that all shut off at that.
Yeah,
for
for buses,
So,
yeah, clearly, yeah.
So that is the route. We have already got it approved, even though it's a state route. The mayor has approved
But
it.
we'll be going through downtown Connersville.
Yes, yes. So that will be done. We've already got it okayed. The new floor at the auditorium is going down. It's been sitting there for 3 days to get ready. So they should start putting that down. Hopefully about 4 weeks will be done, but that's a push. If you haven't seen the baseball field, would like to see pictures, I've got some. We just shot some drone shots over top of it. It's really pretty cool, it looks really good, so that's going on. And our new bus radios came in yesterday. A little bit of a learning curve, a lot better today, so.
Okay, is there anyone else? All right, thank you for all the reports tonight. Okay, let's see, Director of Operations, Mr. Harris.
I'm going to give the good news followed by the bad news. I'll end on the, that is the fund summary. You've got that in front of you. We continue to be in good shape, but I will tell you right now, if you look at the education fund, it went up a little bit since last year. I would fully anticipate that we will be eating into cash balance going forward in order to support the classrooms and, like I said, the decrease in, so I guess I think I've talked about this in past months. It will be intentional that we are going into that. We'll see where we are after we end up with contract negotiations. But right now, we've got a good foundation, but it's going to be challenges ahead.
Okay, thank you. Assistant Superintendent's report? I'm good. Okay, thank you. Superintendent?
I just appreciate all the information that was shared from our administrators. There's a lot of really good stuff going on, and that doesn't happen without leadership and hard work by our teachers and staff. So that's really all I have. I just appreciate all the things that we do for kids that a lot of times people don't realize. There's a lot of work behind the scenes.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, for the good of the cause, does anyone have anything? Mark?
I'd like to recognize Matt that's given us the great coverage that we've got. And
yes.
He's moving on to hopefully bigger and better things, and wish you good luck and appreciate what you've done for the corporation and the board.
Is this your last meeting then? Okay.
Okay. Yes, thank you very much, Matt. I think you've done a great job. So, thank you very much. Okay, anyone else? Okay, with that.
I will make that motion.
Chris?
And I'll second.
Thank you, Ryan.
You've learned your
Everyone in favor, Thank you. Meeting adjourned. Didn't even have to look at you.